Once you've wrapped up this podcast, how about trying a very British cult?
What happens if the person you trust with your future isn't what you think they are?
I did feel the whole time he was watching me.
Yeti?
I saw a footprint, and that really gave me goosebumps.
Or people who knew me?
Emmy, I remember every secret, every lie. I'm the only one who knows the truth.
Discover more of our biggest podcasts from 2023. Listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, insight and analysis you need today on Wednesday the 13th of December. I'm Amy Canavan, and coming up on the show.
Over the course of this competition we've played some really high level football and showed in those moments that we belong at the level, but you have to consistently do that.
Can Celtic salvage some pride against Feyenoord tonight? We'll preview the game and look back on their Champions League campaign.
Immobile's there and he scores! Ciro Immobile breaks Celtic hearts!
And
wait a minute, I think they're going to check a red card here. Cifuentes was booked for the challenge in Bakayoko, and Kevin Clancy's been told by Stephen Kirkland to come over and have a look at the challenge.
after Cifuentes lost his red card appeal, could there be more bad news for Rangers?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Plenty coming up on today's podcast, and I'm pleased to say that I'm not just speaking into a void solo. Our chief sports writer Tom Inglis joins me for it all. How you doing, Tom? Are you well?
I'm good, Amy, thank you.
Plenty more to come from Tom, and we'll also be hearing from Paul John Dykes, host of a Celtic State of Mind podcast. But first, let's quickly run through the Scottish football news of the day. As they prepare to face Feyenoord in their final group game, Brendan Rodgers says that despite a disappointing campaign, Celtic have shown they belong at Champions League level. In last night's game, Scott McTominay and Manchester United crashed out of Europe after defeat at home to Bayern Munich, while Kieran Tierney helped Real Sociedad clinch top spot in their group with a 0-0 draw away at Inter Milan. Rangers midfielder Jose Cifuentes will miss the Viaplay Cup final against Aberdeen on Sunday after an unsuccessful appeal against a red card picked up against Dundee last weekend. Potentially more bad news for the Ibrox club, as papers this morning are reporting that Brazilian striker Danilo will be out for 4 months after scans on his injured knee shows he requires surgery. And in the Championship, Morton beat Inverness Cali Thistle 2-1 at Capello to move off the bottom of the table and up to 7th. Tight in the Championship as ever this season, but let's head to the Champions League and head to Celtic. We'll welcome Paul John Dykes to the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us, Paul. Brendan Rodgers said yesterday that they've shown in spells during this competition that his side belong at Champions League level. Is there any evidence that you agree with that?
There's been some signs, Amy, and that's what makes the entire campaign quite frustrating, actually, because when you look at the home games versus the away games, we've seen two sides of Celtic. I've been calling Celtic a Jekyll and Hyde side this campaign, both domestically and in Europe. So I do get what he means. I think the big issue has been this massive word continually used by Brendan Rodgers, quality. And I think that when you lose quality, it needs to be replaced. And we've not done that. And I think it shows. We're probably going to get what we deserve from this campaign, because when we went into that summer transfer window, we knew where we were. We knew that we were losing 3 players of quality, and we've not replaced them.
Tom, Paul mentions quality there. Brendan Rodgers, as he said, has mentioned it many, many times during this campaign. He also said, though, that Celtic can breach the barrier and bridge the gap. Do you think they can do that with this lack of quality? And obviously, if they can't right now, they ultimately will have to bring in a hell of an amount of quality.
Well, it depends what he means by that. Like Celtic have shown, as Paul John has said, they've shown in little flashes that they can be a very good side. The Atletico Madrid performance at home was absolutely outstanding performance. You know, Lazio away, Feyenoord away, they've had their moments. Lazio at home. But it amounts to 1 point. And the point that Paul John makes about the lack of quality going out and quality not coming in is absolutely well made. Every Celtic fan in the world has been making it. And I think January is going to be very, very interesting for Celtic. Very interesting for Brendan Rodgers because he cannot make it any more plain what he needs and what he wants. Will the board will be aligned with him or not? That's going to be interesting. I think we can look at this Champions League campaign, obviously, and pick the bones out of it. There are nuances to it. There are an injury is a nuance. Injury are nuances. Red cards are nuances. But it amounts to one point. It's not just about this season, and it's not just about Champions League, in my view. This is a 10-year decline in Europe for Celtic in both of the major competitions. It's not just about the Atletico Madrids and the Real Madrids and the stellar superstar teams that they've been losing to, understandably. It's about all the other teams in all the other seasons under all the other different managers. It's about Leipzig and Bodo Glimt and Leverkusen and Sparta Prague and Copenhagen and Cluj, AEK Athens and Malmo and Malda and Fenerbahce and Maribor. It goes back a long way. You know, we could focus on this campaign, understandably, but this is a long time in the post, this.
It has been a long time in the post, Paul, but I think there was a genuine belief at the beginning of this campaign, and particularly when that draw was made, that this could be a group that Celtic would at the very least get third place in and could perhaps progress in Europa League after Christmas. But there were sections of the support that believed that this could be the year that the trend was bucked, and it doesn't feel like a missed opportunity because of that.
It does to a degree, Amy, because it has been, it's not an issue just this season, it has been over a period of time. And when you go into the campaign as a treble-winning side, yes, you take the blow of Ange Postecoglou leaving, but you know, within 2 weeks, we've got a candidate who was the best candidate, I think, available at that time to come back to the club. And it's all about, at that stage, saying, how do we improve on the last campaign? Brendan Rodgers, his first press conferences, he said to him, Europe is always a big factor for this club. He was talking about coming in and playing a brand of attacking, aggressive football. And that's maybe his view, and it's probably the view of many Celtic fans, but I doubt it's the same view that's shared in the boardroom at Celtic, because if you've got a treble-winning team, why are you bringing 9 players in? I don't understand it, unless every single one of them is top quality. And Peter Lawwell said, when we released our record-breaking figures, that there's 2 types of player. And I think every football fan understands you bring players in who can be developed. Matt O'Reilly's a classic example. Best player in the Celtic team this season. He was what is called a project player, so it can work. We didn't need that in the summer. We needed players who would come in and who would positively affect the team, the starting 11. We brought in 9. Only 2 have really played. And even the 2 that have played have been a drop in quality. We've then seen that filtering through the team. Kyogo is a shadow of his former self. And then as a Celtic fan, what happens now is you're looking at tonight thinking to yourself, well, I just want us to get back into a groove, to find some momentum, because I'm now looking ahead to the Rangers game on the 30th of December. So how guilty am I as a football fan just concentrating on domestic? Because I'm just complaining that that's what the board's doing. But that's what happens because obviously people are calling it a dead rubber. I don't think it is. I think we need to get that win. We need to get the monkey off our back. And at that stage, we can start to get into some kind of groove, because at this moment in time, it's been a very stop-start season for Celtic.
I'd like to know why Brendan Rodgers came back. Did he come back just to pick off some easy domestic trophies and drink up the acclaim and the adoration of the Celtic fans? Or was he given reason to believe that Celtic would try and have a push, you know, relatively speaking, in Europe? Was he made that promise, do you think?
I'm starting to wonder, because yesterday, during the press conference, we had the opportunity to ask a couple of questions, and we asked Tom about this dream. We're dreamers, we're football fans, we go into every campaign thinking this could be the campaign, this could be the season. And we asked Brendan the question about European ambitions, aspirations, and he said that he is the man. He believes he's the man to lead us to that. So there's been an ambition there by Brendan Rodgers. I think there's also been a legacy issue that he wanted to put right, without a doubt. But Celtic can't be a project for a manager. We need to ensure that we're bringing him in for the right reasons. It's not just to resolve ills of the past. We need to progress under Brendan. And I've heard all the chat about Brendan's never done it in Europe. Well, He got Leicester City to the semi-finals of the Conference League, and I know people scoff at that as a tournament, but he did something in Europe. And this season, really, when you look at this campaign compared to last, we've done nothing, like you say, going into this last game with a point. There's going to be empty seats at Celtic Park tonight for a Champions League game, and I think that speaks volumes.
I think Brendan himself scoffed at the Conference League, didn't he? He said he'd never heard of it. Now, he did very well in it, but that's an isolated success in an otherwise dismal European record. I mean, his record in European competition across his entire career is very, very poor. And at Celtic, it's knocking on 19 or 20% win return in European competition. I mean, he's obviously a stellar manager, but his record in Europe, Paul John, is just abysmal.
It's really poor. It is poor. And I think, the frustration for me, Tom, is you look at that side last season, you look at the first 65 minutes, and I'm clutching a wee bit here, against Real Madrid, and you think to yourself, you tweak that side, you add quality to it, and then you can start to improve in terms of the European performance. Yeah. And what we've done is we've torn it up. Not only have we lost 3 players who would be first picks, if you go further back, if you go back a year from today, you've got players like Juranovic in the squad, you've got players like Giakoumakis. So not only have we lost the 3 in the summer, we've lost that level of player as well, a wee while prior to the season finishing. So we've lost a lot of quality. I think it shows a lack of ambition in terms of the board. I think there's an issue here with the recruitment of players as well. I mean, if, for example, you look back at Brendan's first time at the club, there was a couple of interviews, Tom, where you're looking at Brendan's body language and you're looking at what he's saying, and it was obvious that there was something afoot. Remember, we signed Marian Sved, and he said, we've got 1 million wingers, we don't need a winger. And you're thinking, right, a month later, Brendan leaves the club. He's starting to fire arrows now in the press conferences, and I think what he's doing is he's getting it in early to the board to say, listen, I don't want a repeat of the summer transfer window this January. And that's going to be difficult because this is a notoriously difficult transfer window. But we need to start planning for next season as well as sorting out this campaign as well.
On to tonight's game then. Paul, you mentioned that it is not a dead rubber. You don't believe that it is. I think that many will agree that this is an opportunity for Celtic to finally get that win in Europe, that long-awaited win in Europe at home. The days of Celtic Park being a cauldron are long gone. How do you see it going?
Well, you're right. It's turned into, big teams coming to the park, Amy, with their phones out. And it's a tourist attraction almost, and we don't want that. We want it to be a fortress. We want it to be very, very difficult, coming to Celtic Park. How do I see it going? Well, if we get the win, it does a lot of things. Firstly, there's the financial element of winning points in the Champions League. Celtic fans at the moment know that we've got piles of money anyway, so that's not a priority for us specifically. But it is for the club. Brendan was asking about coefficient points yesterday. He didn't seem that interested in all that kind of stuff. He just wants to concentrate on Celtic. But what it does do is it gives you an opportunity not to clean the slate, not to clear the slate clean. Absolutely not, because the record has been shocking in recent years. But it does allow us to get over that bump of not winning a game in the Champions League and certainly not winning at home. But I think at the moment we've got to look at how to get back into some form of consistency. We've not won 3 back-to-back games in all competitions this season. We need to start getting into this groove as I speak about, because we've got a tough run of fixtures in December domestically. And that culminates in the big one at the end of the month against Rangers, whereby we can't drop a point. Because, Chris Sutton was scoffed at the other week there. He was talking about Rangers building momentum, Rangers being challengers. He was scoffed at by a lot of Celtic fans, I've got to say. And 1 week later, I think a lot more are actually agreeing with him. Because I don't think they're a great side, but at this moment in time, I don't think Celtic are a great side. So we need to start figuring out what is our identity. Because it's easy to look at Ange Postecoglou's team and say, right, tell me, what was his identity? What was his style of play? It's a wee bit more difficult, Amy, to say that about Brendan's team. And we're bedded in. All the guys that are in the summer are no longer new players. We need to know what the identity is. We need to absolutely focus on getting the best out of Kyogo. Here's a wee start for you, right? The wingers, Palmer and on the other side, Yang. 4 passes to Kyogo successful in the box all season. 4 successful passes between them. Now, you think back to Jota last season, he's probably making 4 successful passes in a game into the box to Kyogo. So Kyogo's been anonymous, he's looked isolated, he's looked a shadow of his former self. We need to change that. And we're better to start than this evening in a Champions League game.
It is like factually, it's a dead rubber. But for all the reasons Paul John has outlined there, it's not. In the real world, this is a very important game for Celtic. They've just on the back of a horrendous defeat to Kilmarnock. They're treading water a little bit domestically as well. They haven't been that impressive at all this season in the round. They're not won at home in the Champions League for 10 years. They need momentum. They need a kickstart. And I tell you, like, if they win tonight, it's a bit of momentum, it's a bit of feel good, and they can kick on and maybe they can feed off that. If they lose, the hoopy huddle hounds of hell will descend again. And that's why it's not meaningless. You know, every game Celtic plays has a meaning, you know, whether it's to build on momentum or to arrest a decline. And they're in the latter category at the moment.
The Hoopy Hounds of Hell, that sounds like a great name for a new Celtic podcast, Tom. And I'm sure in the next couple of months, it'll pop up somewhere. But yeah, I think it's going to be quite a tense atmosphere rather than the typical Champions League atmosphere this evening, Amy.
Well, Paul John Dykes, we might have you on soon as the host of the Hoopy Hounds of Hell podcast rather than the Celtic State of Mind podcast as ever. Thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure, Amy. Thanks very much.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Moving on from Celtic, as I mentioned in the roundup earlier, potentially a double blow for Rangers with bad news about Jose Cifuentes and Danilo. We'll deal with Cifuentes first. Tom, are you surprised at all that the red card appeal failed?
Well, first of all, I didn't think it was a red card, but then there's a lot of disagreement on that. So I'm not surprised having red card having been issued. I'm not surprised it was overturned, but I don't think it should have been issued in the first place. So yeah, this is a problem. Look, Cifuentes, I think has been, to call him average, it would be probably a soft analysis, but it's a body, and Rangers are struggling for bodies, you know. So I guess he'll be a loss, but is Cifuentes part of the solution for Rangers? I don't think he is. Certainly nothing that I've seen. But I think it's harsh on him that he misses this for that incident.
As you say, Philippe Clement's side really down to the bare bones. Two big games coming up. You know, I think we're in the week of a League Cup final, and that's not even the first game that we're looking towards. I think speaks volumes of the hectic schedule. So he will be missing Sunday's League Cup final as well. Danilo, who, as we mentioned earlier, is out for around 4 months. That's a huge loss as well, isn't it? And you're thinking then, who is stepping up to fill that void? Do you have much faith in Cyril Dessers to be able to do that?
Well, no. Like Danilo looks to me like a good player, but he's a work in progress. And he might be a long work in progress. He's only scored 4 league goals. So that is not prolific, right? He's got other goals, but he's not prolific. Dessers has got 5 in the league. So he's ahead of Danilo, even though a lot of people would say, no, Danilo is much better, and he probably is. Sima is the one. Like, do they put Dessers through the middle? Probably. Sima, they could put him through the middle, but then you take him away from his best position where he's been very, very effective. There's Kemar Roof, but can you rely on him? What's his state of fitness at the moment? He started 4 league games in a season and a half. I think it's 13 league games in 2.5 seasons. For me, Roof is the best of them, if they're all fit. But Kemar Roof, you'd need a full report from the medics to confirm that he's fit. You know, it is a problem, and it's why they should have gone and got Lawrence Shanklin in the summer. There you go. That's another podcast, Amy.
That's another podcast, though. We're running out of time for today. My many thanks to Tom English and Paul John Dykes. Remember, you can get full coverage of Celtic against Feyenoord on BBC Radio Scotland Extra tonight from 7 o'clock. Alistair Lamont and Stephen Thompson will be in Seville to preview Rangers' crucial Europa League game with Betis tomorrow, and Ian McCall will be here to look at the weekend's championship fixtures. So if you've got any questions for the guys, email them in to scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. We'll be back tomorrow and every other day of the week, but for now, take care and bye-bye.
Just a quick word to say the Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English for everything you need to know about the world of Scottish rugby. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.